Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're exploring a seriously fascinating journey. We're going to track how environmental consciousness actually scales up. We're talking everything from the deeply personal, everyday choices we make, right up to the collective power of a local neighborhood, and eventually all the way to the global stage. It's a really compelling look at how taking responsibility for our planet takes all sorts of shapes and sizes. We've got some incredible source material to pull from today that brings these different scales of action to life. So let's get right into it.
To really understand our first scale of action, which is the personal level, we have to look at the concept of ahimsa. Now, you might be familiar with this. Ahimsa is a core principle of nonviolence, famously preached by Mahatma Gandhi, the frail man who won India her freedom. But what's so fascinating here is that Gandhiji didn't just apply nonviolence to human or political conflicts. He applied it directly and rigorously to his own lifestyle. For instance, he wore ahimsa leather sandals. These were crafted exclusively from the hide of cows that had died a natural death, completely bypassing the violence of the slaughterhouse. For him, true nonviolence was an entirely holistic way of living.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Nonviolence as a lifestyle. 2. Ahimsa silk and cruelty-free craft. 3. Community action through greening neighborhoods. And finally, 4. A child's plea for Earth.
Starting with Section 1, Nonviolence as a Lifestyle, and Ahimsa silk, cruelty-free craft. This whole story kicks into gear with Mrs. Janaki Venkatraman, who was the wife of former Indian President R. Venkatraman. She wanted to buy a beautiful silk sari, but she walked in with one very strict condition before handing over any money. The silk had to be woven without killing a single silkworm.
Well, this request completely stumped the manager at the time. No one asked for that. He had to rush over to his technical assistant, Mr. Kusuma Rajaya, who confirmed a pretty shocking reality about the traditional silk industry. To make just one single traditional silk sari, it can mean the death of up to 50,000 silkworms. 50,000! Think about that for a second. It highlights this really profound kind of tragic irony. The cocoon, which is brilliantly designed by nature to protect a growing insect, becomes its literal death trap, just so we can harvest that lustrous yarn.
There's a stark contrast between these two production methods. In the traditional method, just 7 days before maturity, the cocoons are gathered up and thrown into heat chambers at 70 to 90 degrees Celsius for hours. This outright kills the insect inside just to make the cocoon pliable for spinning. But then you have the ahimsa method, which was completely inspired by Gandhiji's vision. In this cruelty-free craft, weavers literally just wait. They only use the cocoons that have been naturally left behind by the mature moths after they've safely flown away into the world. It's entirely peaceful.
Now, you might be wondering, what's the catch? Well, it comes down to the economic reality of making an eco-friendly choice. When a moth leaves its home naturally, it has to puncture the cocoon, which breaks the continuous silk thread. Because of this, the yarn yield drops dramatically. From an ordinary, boiled cocoon, you get about an 80% yield. But from a punctured, empty ahimsa cocoon, that yield plummets to an abysmal 16%. Consequently, the finished ahimsa sari is about 1.5 times costlier than regular silk. But honestly, as animal rights activists have pointed out, considering the thousands of lives it saves, it's a remarkably small price to pay.
Bringing this cruelty-free technology to the actual market wasn't a walk in the park either. It required massive personal sacrifice. Back in January 2001, Mr. Rajajaya started by purchasing 105 kilograms of discarded cocoons. But funding was a massive hurdle. He actually had to tap into his own personal provident fund in savings just to keep the dream alive. Once he secured the funding, he had the exhausting task of persuading the Indorama mills in Chhattisgarh to spin this highly unconventional broken silk. But ultimately, his dedication paid off when 30 samples of ahimsa silk saris were finally ready for market trials. It's a brilliant testament to the power of one individual's dedication to an environmental ideal.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Community Action and Greening Neighborhoods. Let's shift gears and see how environmental consciousness manifests when an entire neighborhood gets involved.
This brilliantly illustrates the unbelievable transformation of Defense Colony. On one hand, you have the before state, overflowing bins, a constantly stinking environment, and local parks completely ruined by private marriage parties, which basically left the area a haven for stray animals. But then, look at the after. It's a total 180-degree turnaround. We're talking beautifully manicured parks, full-time gardeners, and a palpable, deep sense of pride among the residents. It's just your classic, inspiring underdog story of citizens taking back their local environment.
So how exactly did they pull this off?
Well, the Residents' Welfare Association didn't just snap their fingers. They tackled the root cause on day one by flat-out banning marriage parties in the parks. To afford the hefty initial costs for grass, seeds, and manure, they actually pooled their own funds. They aggressively liaised with municipal authorities to secure proper water connections, too. But the biggest hurdle? A totally lukewarm initial response from the community itself. That meant going door to door, having real conversations to persuade housewives, retired folks, and everyday citizens to volunteer their precious time and money. Little by little, they turned resistance into serious, unstoppable momentum.
Which brings us to Section 3, A Child's Plea for Earth. Now let's zoom way out to the ultimate macro level. We're traveling back to the 1992 UN Earth Summit in Brazil.
I want to introduce you to Severin Suzuki. Back in 1992, she was just 12 years old. She and her friends in the Environmental Children's Organization went out and raised every penny themselves to travel 5,000 miles to Rio de Janeiro. Her mission? To stand up in front of a room absolutely packed with global delegates, powerful politicians, and business leaders, and challenge them directly on behalf of all the generations to come.
Severin did not hold back. She outlined grave, planetary concerns to these adults, expressing a deep, visceral fear of literally losing her future. She talked about being terrified to just go out in the sun because of the holes in the ozone layer. She feared breathing the air because of unknown chemicals. She brought up the absolute tragedy of animals and plants going extinct every single day. She even shared a personal story about fishing in Vancouver with her dad, only to find the fish completely riddled with cancers. It was a raw, undeniable presentation of the environmental crisis coming straight from a kid.
During her speech, she delivered this incredibly powerful line. She said, "If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it." It's profound in its simplicity, isn't it? She systematically pointed out to the leaders of the free world that they had no idea how to fix the ozone holes, no idea how to bring back dead animals, or turn deserts back into lush forests. And her logic is unvarnished and bulletproof. If you adults cannot repair the earth, you have absolutely no right to continue destroying it.
But Severin's consciousness wasn't just limited to ecology. She saw the whole picture. While she was in Brazil, she spent time with street children who lived in absolute poverty. Yet those kids told her they would share their food and shelter if they ever became rich. This starkly contrasted with the reality she saw in wealthy northern countries. She literally looked at the delegates and asked, "If a child on the street who has nothing is willing to share, why are we who have everything still so greedy?" She recognized her own privilege living in Canada and challenged the systemic greed that fuels both global poverty and environmental destruction.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn directly from her closing remarks. She looked right at the leaders of the world and said, "At school, you teach us not to hurt creatures, to share, and to clean up our mess. Are you doing the things you tell us not to do? From the deeply personal choice of buying an ahimsa silk sari, to cleaning up a local park and defense colony, all the way to a 12-year-old demanding global accountability, environmental action is fundamentally about aligning our behaviors with the values we actually claim to hold. So looking at your own life and your own scale of action, are you cleaning up your mess? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks some powerful reflections for you today.